Hello again, and welcome to episode 6 of this weird Pokemon adventure. Now that we have the Fly and Surf HMs, a lot of stuff opens up. There's going to be a lot more Pokemon to capture and a lot more items to find, which means Red has a lot of work ahead of her. Anyways, we can start by going up the stairs in this guard tower. Most of the guard towers have a second floor where you can find somebody with items or maybe a Pokemon to trade. This girl in particular gives you the Swift TM. Swift is a move that never ever misses. Even considering the glitch in Generation 1 where all moves have at least a 1 out of 256 chance of missing, Swift never misses in spite of that. So that's nice. It helps out when you're fighting somebody with double team, but it's not really a strong move, so its use is maybe limited. And this guy here will give you the Super Rod, which is the final fishing rod and the one that lets you actually capture a lot of different Pokemon. I mean, geez, you can find this before the good rod if you come this way before going to Fuchsia City. And now that we have it, we can start fishing in the Safari Zone. The good thing about fishing is that it doesn't use up any steps. Normally you have to take a step in order to encounter something in the grass. But here, you can just fish as many times as you want without moving a single step. So you just have to get into the location you want to fish in, and then start fishing, and hopefully land a bite. And as you can see, I've already gotten one. I've captured Slowpoke, a rather goofy looking, but actually very competitive Pokemon. This thing saw a lot of use, and it is very much a big threat. Though I capture a few Pokemon through fishing, you don't actually have to fish that much. There's really only one Pokemon that I can think of that I know you have to fish in the Safari Zone for. The rest can be encountered while you're surfing on the water later on in the game, so we'll get to those. But at any rate, fishing can be rather irritating because you have to actually go into the inventory and select the rod over and over in order to fish multiple times in a row. Suffice to say, as much as I might think modern Pokemon is losing the depth and charm of its predecessors, playing through these games again has made me appreciate some of the quality of life changes they started introducing. In particular, I've actually decided to do some training with Red off screen. There is a lot of leveling up you have to do in order to evolve some of the Pokemon, so I decided to take care of that off camera because you do need to do a lot of training if you just use wild Pokemon. It takes a long time. So if you notice that my levels have jumped up or my playtime seems to have gone up significantly, don't worry about it. That just means I was doing something off camera, and no, I did not spend like 40 hours playing this game already. I was using a lot of emulator turbo, so that's gonna make the in-game clock just a little bit inaccurate, I think. Oh, hey, I'm also catching a Krabby here. This is a Pokemon that Ash had in the show, so I should really be showing this being caught in Yellow version, I think. A Yellow version actually has a lot of cases where you can fish for certain Pokemon way sooner than you can in Red and Blue versions. It's actually pretty interesting. My opinion of Yellow has only gone up since starting these playthroughs. It's really weird. I used to not like it as much, but, you know, playing it alongside the others has really put it in perspective just how much of an improvement it actually was. Anyways, I've caught Dratini, which is the only Pokemon that you have to fish for, I think. I'll double check later. And you have to fish for him in the Safari Zone, so capturing him makes you say Drat and double Drat quite a lot. That's why they call him Dratini. Nah, it's actually just Dragon merged with Tiny. Anyways, now that we have Surf, we can return to Route 9, and you might remember that there was a body of water here next to the patch of grass with a bunch of Voltorb in it. Voltorb is a really weird Pokemon to find in the grass considering its electric type, which is actually a very subtle hint that there is more to this area than meets the eye. At least in my opinion, it's a hint that there's something more here. As much as I rag on Generation 1, there's a lot more attention to detail packed into these games than I ever could have imagined. Anyways, following this river will take you to an entirely optional dungeon, and I cannot for the life of me remember the last time an optional dungeon was in a Pokemon game, but my memory is probably just hazy. Anyways, this is an abandoned power plant, which is really weird. One might expect the region's power plant to not be abandoned, otherwise how do we have computers and other electronics? Then again, maybe the Pokemon inside the power plant are the ones supplying the power? Just by being there? I mean, Pikachu does conduct a lot of electricity. Anyways, you gotta be careful in this area because while there are items to find, some of the items could actually turn out to be traps in the form of Voltorbs. They look like item balls, and if you touch one, they will actually attack you, and they can very well explode in your face and do a lot of damage that way. You can also find Magnemite in this area, in case red and white spheres weren't your thing. You can also find gray spheres with magnets attached and that eye in the center for some reason. Yet another one of the designs I think a lot of people make jokes about considering what it evolves into, but whatever. Another new Pokemon you can find in here is Electabuzz, exclusive to the red version and very, very uncommon. I had to search for quite a while to actually find this guy. But hey, he's a pretty high level, maybe I'll actually use him somewhere. There are a couple of other items throughout the power plant, but there's no dungeon gimmick or anything, so there's really not much to it besides being one extra area with a couple extra Pokemon. And there is one big Pokemon you can find, but unfortunately Red is very underprepared for it, so I'm not going to be able to actually take on whatever that bird thing there is. We'll have to wait and come back later. I mean, this place is optional anyways, we can come back whenever we want. So it's off to Vermilion City. Why did I decide to fly there? I can't really remember, actually, but I did randomly decide to go fishing again, because fishing in different areas does let you find different Pokemon. It's actually possible to fish for Pokemon in literally any body of water in the game. Inside towns, inside dungeons, inside the Cerulean City gym. Yep, any body of water and you'll find something. Actually, how does anyone go for a swim? There could be Pokemon in the body of water you're swimming in. Oh well. Anyways, I've caught Shelder, who is actually known to be a very powerful Pokemon when he evolves. Unfortunately, all of these fished up Pokemon were caught at level 15, so it might be a while before they're up to speed with the rest of the party. Returning to Celadon City for a brief moment, you can now surf over that little pool of water and meet this guy, who will give you the TM for Soft Boiled, which can be used on precisely one Pokemon in the entire game. Actually, it's 2 Pokemon, but I still don't know why you dedicate an entire TM to a move that only 2 Pokemon can actually learn. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I also thought you could fish for Grimer in this pond for some reason, but that is apparently not the case at all. Very odd. Anyways, with the housekeeping out of the way, we can finally move on with the main story. So the guardhouses surrounding this city have been closed throughout the entire game. However, by bribing the guard with a simple drink from the vending machines, you can get past, and apparently this guard shares the drink with the other guards. Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and buy drinks for everybody if you're gonna do that. Anyways, welcome to Saffron City, the biggest city in the game, and it's now being occupied by Team Rocket. Again, Team Rocket, they actually got something done here. They managed to get the entire town under their control, and all of the citizens are on lockdown. Nobody is allowed to leave their houses. Well, except for this guy, I guess. There are rocket grunts blocking some of the other buildings, but not this one. This guy gives you the TM for Psychic, which is a very powerful move that will, on occasion, lower the enemy's special stat, so it's kind of powerful. Anyways, on to the next dungeon. It's right here in town, as a matter of fact. There's apparently supposed to be a guard sleeping in front of the building, but I guess he's not there in yellow version? A little strange. Anyways, this is Silphco, a Fortune 500 company that's currently being negotiated with by Team Rocket. This dungeon is deceptively easy, though it has many floors and a lot of confusing teleporter paths. In reality, you just have to find this one specific item on the 5th floor, and then you basically have free reign to go directly to the boss if you want. Which kinda makes designing the entire interior a bit of a waste, but I guess dungeon design wasn't at its peak in 1996. This upcoming Rocket Grunt is really the only one you have to fight before reaching the top floor. He's nothing we can't deal with at this point, but this is where I actually started using Ghastly. Ghastly, as it turns out, is way tougher than I imagined he would be. I mean, I already knew ghost types were very, very good because they take 0 damage from normal and fighting type moves, and a lot of Pokemon have a lot of normal type moves in this game. But Ghastly is also part poison, which means he will resist poison attacks, which the Rocket Grunts have a lot of. Ghastly also gets Confuse Ray and Lick, which inflicts paralysis and later hypnosis, and Nightshade, which you might be tempted to think is a useless move because it only does damage equal to your current level. Most enemies at this point in the game don't really have more than 70 or 80 health, so Nightshade can actually be very good here. It's going to do 26 damage per use at my current level, and Nightshade is also unaffected by type matchups, so if you use it against a normal type, it'll still do damage. Ghastly has his weaknesses, of course, but he has so many strengths that I never really thought about because I just never used any Pokemon besides the starter in this game, I guess. It's really weird. Anyways, here is the card key. Now you can open up all the doors in the building, and you can basically just go directly to the boss if you so desire it. But I'm going to fight this guy next, because I need some more EXP for Ghastly. I caught Ghastly at level 26, and that's not far off from being able to evolve. So that's really, really nice. Just gonna take this guy out. He probably doesn't have much of interest. He's got a Voltorb, I guess. Maybe it'll explode and do no damage to the ghost type. Wouldn't that be funny? Well, that apparently did not happen, but I still won. So Ghastly has hit level 27. I think he actually evolves at level 25, but I caught him at such a high level that he can evolve straight away after gaining just one level anyways. So, Ghastly is evolving into Haunter, which Ash had in the show for, like, one episode, I guess. But then Ash did get a Gengar in one of the more recent seasons, so I guess me using Ghastly here doesn't violate the Ash's Pokemon Only challenge. Maybe this makes the rest of the game too easy. You be the judge of that. I'll just keep playing. Anyways, you can find more items, including a couple TMs if you search the building thoroughly, or you can wait until you've defeated the boss, that way you don't have to deal with all the trainers. But then again, that's a lot of free EXP you'd be missing out on if you just waited until the boss, so naturally that's what I did. Anyways, that teleporter just below me is where you want to go in order to fight the boss, but I'm going to pick up this Hyper Potion just in case I need it, you never know. Just hop into that teleporter, and hey, it's our rival, he's back again too. I have no idea why he's here, honestly. I mean, Team Rocket is kind of trying to take over the entire city, so you might want to maybe team up with me to try and stop them. Oh, of course, he's actually going to fight us first. Maybe because he wants to be the one to take on Team Rocket and win. He doesn't want us getting in on the glory. But again, you can interpret the events of the game in numerous ways, so take your pick. So first, let's check out how Red handles this fight. Now, something that's unfortunately becoming a trend with my Red and Blue playthroughs is that I'm basically just falling back on the strategy of running over all the enemies with my strongest moves in Pokemon, so Charizard here can just sweep most of the entire enemy team by slashing at them. He's learned Slash, which is a high crit move. Also, the rival has regular potions for some reason. Regular potions, not super potions, not hyper potions, normal potions. I don't understand why. But as I was saying, you can see that I'm basically running over all the enemies with super effective moves and using Slash, which is a high crit chance move. Also, the enemy has Leech Seed, which I just found out Leech Seed is actually called Mistletoe in Japan, so this is kind of the Christmas episode, I guess. Mistletoe is a parasitic plant, so I have no idea why everyone wants to kiss while standing under it. It's kinda strange. Maybe it's the parasites doing something to our brains. Maybe they are getting into our heads, and I'm really just filling for dead air as I take on this very easy fight. You can see that it's very easy to just run over all the enemies because the starter Pokemon are actually pretty strong. Of course, I would have trouble with Blastoise, but that's why I trained Gloom. Gloom is still really good. What's unfortunate is, because my brain kept defaulting to just use the strongest attack you've got on the strongest Pokemon you've got, Gloom is at this point the only other Pokemon that I've sufficiently trained and used, so I'm gonna train a couple of others off screen and maybe try to get use out of them as the game goes on for Red, but yeah. My apologies for not putting in more effort to make these fights actually interesting. But you can only really do so much besides attack it until it dies, when attack it until it dies is pretty optimal in Generation 1. The enemies try to do it to you too, so they're no different. Well, actually, I think something that is worth talking about is the reason why Sleep is so overpowered, considering Gloom is using it to defeat Blastoise here. Sleep is overpowered because it takes an entire turn just to wake up, and the turn after you've done that, your opponent could just put you to sleep again. So if they're faster than you, there's basically no way to escape from your eternal rest. Putting it that way makes it sound a lot darker than it actually is. Anyways. Moving over to Blue version, we can see that the strat is not that much different in this version of the fight. The rival is still using regular potions for some reason. I don't really understand that. That's the first time I've ever seen this rival actually use a regular potion of all things. Anyways, this rival does in fact have the final evolution of the starter, so we get to see Venusaur finally, long before Green actually got it. Again, Blastoise should really be at a disadvantage here, but with Ice Beam, you can just decimate Venusaur in seconds. Venusaur even went for Leech Seed, thinking it was a super effective move, but it really should have gone for Razor Leaf, which I assume Venusaur has. Anyway, I didn't have anything in particular to say about the green version of this fight. I just wanted to point out, ladies and gentlemen, the invincible and immortal Derpizard. Out of all the classic quote-unquote sprites in Generation 1, I think the one for Charizard is my absolute favorite. Anyways, let's move on to yellow version, because this version of the fight was shockingly very difficult. I say, as my opponent has Jolteon. At this point, the rival will now choose an evolution for Eevee based on your actions at the beginning of the game, which is actually a really interesting concept. If you lose both of the first two rival fights, he will have Vaporeon. If you won one of the battles but lost the other, he will have Flareon. And if you won both of them, he will have Jolteon, which is what you're seeing here. And Jolteon is actually a nightmare to fight against. He has very, very high speed, which gives him a 1 in 4 chance for every hit to become a critical hit, because critical hit chance is based on base speed, and Jolteon's is very high. It was really surprising how challenging this turned out to be. I really was pushed to my limit here. This Jolteon has double kick, which means Snorlax is getting thrashed, and I don't have any ground types, so I'm not immune to Thunder Shock. And all of these moves can have as many critical hits as Jolteon wants, especially double kick and later Pin Missile, because those are multi-hitting attacks, and in Gen 1, instead of each individual hit of the multi-hitting attack having a chance to crit, the game rolls for criticals one time, and then if it lands a critical, all of the hits in the multi-hitting attack become critical. So Jolteon, kind of a powerhouse, and way up there in the tier list as well. The other two evolutions for Eevee are not interesting at all, which makes it really weird that one of the 3 possible fights here can be just that much more difficult than the other two. Of course, it's worth noting that I am still restricting myself to Pokemon only used by Ash. If I had Nidoking in here like most yellow players normally would have, that fight would have been significantly less difficult. Speaking of Pokemon used by Ash, your prize quote-unquote for beating the rival there is to talk to this guy, who will give you a Lapras. It is a one-of-a-kind Pokemon. Ash had a Lapras in the Orange Islands arc before he released it, like he does with most of his other Pokemon, so I think I'm qualified to use it myself in yellow version and not release it. There's a generic Rocket Grunt guarding the boss on the next floor, and he's using a Cubone and a Marowak, which is very interesting considering what happened back at the Pokemon Tower. Not really anything special about this fight, I just think it was interesting to point out that one of these guys has the gall to actually use a Marowak. Oh yeah, and a completely unrelated fact, since I forgot to point it out until now, Silphco are the guys who made the Silph Scope that we used in the Pokemon Tower. I thought that was worth pointing out. It seems they are a tech juggernaut of sorts. No wonder Team Rocket wants to make a business deal with them. Anyways, it's time to boot out Giovanni for the second time. He hasn't really changed a whole lot in Red and Blue versions. Still has the same basic loadout. No doubt Dugtrio will be able to sweep this entire team of his, and if you're low on power points, you can always retreat back to the Pokemon Center. There's no penalty for doing so, and it's very easy to get back up here. Seriously, why are all the types used by the enemies weak to ground? It's getting a little repetitive over here. The red version of the fight isn't that much different either. I'd like to say that Charizard can avoid the ground attacks because it's now part flying, but the enemies just don't seem to have any ground attacks. Most of the enemy Pokemon that I've been facing just seem to use a bunch of normal moves, which means they don't get the bonus for having a move the same type as the user. I don't really get it. Luckily, there's a way I can make this at least a little bit interesting in the green version of this fight. You may remember that we picked up a TM that teaches Toxic back in Fuchsia City. Toxic is a very buggy move in Generation 1. Most players know this trick already. Toxic, as you know, poisons the opponent and makes it so that the poison damage does more and more damage over time as the battle goes on. However, it just so happens that Leech Seed has the exact same damage calculation algorithm as Toxic, so when Toxic's damage goes up as the battle goes on, Leech Seed's damage also goes up. Not only does this effectively double the amount of damage, but it's also increasing the amount of health recovered from Leech Seed. This would of course be thwarted entirely by simply switching out the affected Pokemon, because that would eliminate Leech Seed, and switching out in Generation 1 changes Toxic Poison back into regular Poison. And using Toxic again would simply reset the amount of damage that Toxic does back down to the minimum. Toxic is also buggy in a couple of other ways, but I'll save that for when I can actually make use of them. Just know that this isn't the end of the Toxic glitches quite yet. As a matter of fact, there is one very interesting oddity that I have never seen happen before that is going to happen in this exact fight on the next turn. So brace yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. I've been playing Generation 1 for many years now, and every time I do, I seem to discover something new. In these series of weird playthroughs, I have found out some very interesting quirks that I never knew about before. So watch very carefully what happens after this attack finishes. So Toxic is going to knock him out, and then Leech Seed goes anyway and recovers my health. But even though the enemy had 0 health, it still recovered, like, as much damage as it possibly could have. What is going on with this game? I've never seen that happen before. I've never heard it talked about. Oh, hey, Ivysaur also now has Razor Leaf. That's nice. It only took him until level 30. But now you've got a decent move if you've leveled him up this far. You don't need to rely on Vine Whip and its 10 PP anymore. So, in Yellow version, instead of the generic Rocket Grunt, there is another battle with Jesse and James. They still haven't changed that much either. I don't really think I remember anything peculiar happening in this fight. It's just Haunter sweeping them all because Haunter is immune to Meowth's normal attacks and resistant to the poison attacks of Arbok and Weezing. Still the same old team. Well, if nothing else, it could be said that they are very reliable for comic relief. Especially if you hit them with both Paralysis and Confusion at the same time. That essentially gives them a 25% chance of being able to do literally anything at all. Blast off at the speed of light? Again. Now then, moving on to the Yellow version of the Giovanni fight. Nothing really special going on here either. I just wanted to point out to anyone who jokes about Vaporeon being the most compatible Pokemon to mate with a human or something, you guys need to shove off. Nidoqueen was here first. Did you see that chest? That was amazing. And if you don't believe me, look up the animations Nidoqueen has in Pokemon Stadium. Anyways, moving on to not crazy topics. Now that we've booted Giovanni out, all of his rocket grunts go with him. And we can actually get a reward from the president of Silphco. They've been working on something really special, and we get to try it out for them. Yes, this is the moment in which the player receives the Master Ball. This is a single-use Pokeball that will work 100% of the time, so you really want to save it for a Pokemon that you know is going to be very difficult to capture without it. Namely, some of the one-of-a-kind legendaries that exist in the game, but we'll get to that later. Now that Team Rocket's gone, this house is open and you can go upstairs to meet this girl who apparently copies everything you say, but the protagonist never says anything, so it's really hard to tell if she's actually doing that. Anyway, if you give her a Pokédoll, she will give you the TM for Mimic, which allows you to copy one of your opponent's moves in battle. That can be versatile at times, and while we're at it, we may as well steal from her. Just take the gold nugget from her desk. What was she doing with one of those anyways? Why is it there? Is that like her life savings? Did we just steal her money? Yeah, maybe we should move on to actual heroic deeds, such as beating up amateur battlers and humiliating them. Yeah, Saffron City actually has 2 gyms. One of them is an unofficial fighting dojo, and the other is the Psychic Gym, which is where we get the badge, like always. But going to the fighting dojo is also worth it because you can pick up a rare one-of-a-kind Pokemon here as well. All of these trainers use fighting types, which should be very easy for us to overcome because, well, in Yellow version, Yellow has a Haunter, so they're not going to be able to do any sort of damage to Haunter at all because all of their moves are normal in fighting. Kind of unfortunate for them. We can make a number of guesses as to why they are not the official gym and the other one is the official gym. One of these possibilities is that, well, they are a fighting gym and the other gym is a psychic gym, so it's possible that the psychic gym simply crushed all of the fighters and that's how they determined who the official gym was going to be, because fighting types are weak against psychic types. Of course, I'm just using a ghost here. This first opponent has a move that lets him increase his attack power, and even beyond the fact that this is pointless because he can never damage Haunter, Haunter has inflicted confusion upon this poor sap, and something that I haven't pointed out is that the amount of damage you take when you hit yourself in confusion is based on your attack stat. So by raising his attack stat, he has made it so that he will take more damage if he fails the confusion roll. How nice for him. I could have just fought him normally, but I decided to humiliate him instead. This next opponent might do a little bit of damage. Hitmonchan actually has a couple of elemental punch attacks, but they're useless because all of the elemental punches use the special stat, and Hitmonchan has a very low special stat. His strength is his attack stat. The reason for that is because they tied the stat that a move uses to its type, so all of the fire, electric, and ice attacks use the special stat, and fighting and normal attacks use the physical stat. Yeah, I am pretty thankful for Generation 4 changing it so that every individual move can be special or physical. It's no longer based solely on the type. Good on them for finally realizing that Alakazam should not be as good at punching as the guy with boxing gloves for hands. Huh, you know, that makes me think Strong Bad would really like Hitmonchan. And as a reward, you get to take one of the 2 fighting Pokemon that you just defeated in the most hilariously humiliating battle of all time. Let it not be said that the reward doesn't match the challenge, because oh boy does it match the challenge. Since you can only take one of the 2 Pokemon, you have to trade with somebody else to get the other one, but at least they don't evolve or anything. That would have been even more annoying. So, moving on from that, let's see what Green is up to. Green is also training in the Fighting Dojo. Now that he has Razor Leaf, Ivysaur can actually do some real leveling up. Which is good, because Ivysaur actually levels up at level 32. The other starters reach their final forms at level 36. I'll give you that that's one advantage of starting with Bulbasaur. You get the final form 4 levels earlier, but Bulbasaur is still such a horrible Pokemon to use. I would not choose him on any future playthroughs of this. But there you have it. You've seen the final forms of all 3 starters. Let's move on. Now it's time for the official Saffron City Gym, which involves a teleporter maze as its puzzle. You better believe navigating this was annoying the first time around, but luckily I know the solution. You just follow this series of teleporters, and then you will be in the room with the gym leader, who has a different sprite between yellow version and red and blue versions. Interesting. Her name is Sabrina, and she holds a whip in battle. Still really weird to see. Kind of hardcore for them to be carrying whips. This does not happen in modern Pokemon at all. Sabrina uses the Psychic type, which is yet another example of weird Generation 1 design choices. The Psychic type is supposed to be weak against Bug and Ghost, but there are really no good moves of either type that you could actually get and use in this battle. Also, most of the Pokemon that use those types of moves, or at least get the same type bonus for using them, they're weak against the Psychic type anyways. So Psychics basically have no weakness aside from the fact that they have very low physical stats. So it's very easy to beat this battle by just hitting through them with your strongest physical moves anyways, which is what Blue is doing. Also, Sabrina has a Venomoth for some reason. I don't really understand that. Venomoth is a bug poison type. It can use Psychic moves, but it's not a Psychic type itself. Kinda doesn't make a lot of sense, but some variety is appreciated. Maybe the designers thought you would throw out a bug here and decided to send in a poison type, but then there's not really any good poison type moves anyways, and I don't really know what they were thinking here, I'm sorry. You can see that Red is basically using the same strategy as Blue, so let's move over to Green and see what crazy strategy he decides to come up with. Level 3 Weedle. I certainly wouldn't have thought of that. I wonder if there's some secret to this. No, I don't really get what Green was going for there, but let's move on to Yellow version. Yellow version, again, changes this fight in order to match up with the anime somewhat. Instead of that variety of Pokemon that Sabrina had in Red and Blue, Yellow version just makes her use Abracadabra and then Alakazam. 3 Pokemon from the same evolutionary line might seem boring, but I guess it is meant to represent the fact that Abra evolved mid-battle in the show, so that's what they were going for here. It's like fighting the same Pokemon over and over as it gets stronger and stronger, which I guess is a little bit interesting, and since Alakazam's level is so high, it's actually kind of a threat with all of the crazy moves and damage it can deal out. As you can see, this Ash Ketchum theme team was kind of unprepared for a level 50 Alakazam with a really strong attack. So let's send out Pikachu as always. Of course, getting in a Thunder Wave is a very good play no matter what you're trying to do, and that Reflect move actually reduces the damage from physical attacks for 5 turns, so that's another thing it can do. I'm going to try and set up the double team trick again, but that doesn't exactly work because Alakazam just has to get lucky once. My evasion was not that high after a single double team. Okay, so this is looking a little bit dangerous. Maybe there is something I can do here. I know, I could maybe try and get Alakazam to attack itself? Let's follow in the footsteps of our Lord and Savior Ash Ketchum and send a Ghost against the Psychic type. So I'm going to lay down Confuse Ray, and hopefully this stops him from attacking. And it does. Okay, so this is working. Let's go for a Lick. Oh yeah, I forgot. In Generation 1, due to a typo, they accidentally made the Psychic types immune to Ghost, which was supposed to be super effective against them. Nightshade would have still done damage, so I should have gone for that, but nothing like making a joke every now and again, right? At least I'm faster than Alakazam. He'll never get rid of that paralysis, so I can at least hope that Primeape clinches the match for me. Well, that's not a lot of damage, but hopefully if it hurts itself, which it does, that's good. And another Karate Chop, that should take it down to very low health, so as long as it doesn't decide to not... Oh, it went for Reflect. Why? I know Reflect is a Psychic type, but it went for Reflect? It should have gone for Psychic. That'd have done damage, at least. Oh, Generation 1, never changed. So with that, we have 6 badges. Pokemon up to level 70 obey us now, and you don't get an HM move for this because we actually have all of the HM moves already. And it doesn't give you a boost to any stats either, but whatever. Also, I discovered something really silly in my blue playthrough. So, you probably know that you can dig to escape certain gyms. For some reason, they count as dungeons, but if you use dig on a teleporter tile, it plays the teleport animation instead of the dig animation. Very, very bizarre, and I literally discovered it on that exact recording, so... Again, every time I play this game, I find out something new, and it is fabulous. Even if it is a little thing like that. Anyways, it seems Green is going in for the rematch, and wait a minute, who's talking to him right now? And why is it giving him TM46? Wait a minute. This is dialogue from when you beat Sabrina, so that means... Green has the badge? What? Green lost but got the badge anyways? I give up. I can't with this guy anymore. See you in the next episode, everybody.